And so at the point where they understand that they don't really understand where they were born, that they don't really know where they were born, if they're using the astronomical model, the modern astronomy, you sort of have them if they're rational and well-informed as far as their respect for what you're saying about the nature of their source, of where they came from. And that brings a lot of very interesting responses. What I've noticed is that depending on how open-minded the individual is, how honest they are with themselves, how invested they are in their existing worldview, any number of things can happen. They can have any number of reactions to the information, to the understanding. This is something that I believe astronomers just haven't really thought out. I am going to attach this particular video to a video by someone that made a video response to my What Are the Stars video. And he read something in Carl Sagan's book Cosmos about this. And I don't think that, while Carl may have treated it in Cosmos, I don't think that it was ever properly treated in the astronomical worldview. I don't believe that this has been actually analyzed and published, and any type of refutation made it into the canons. On the other hand, Gadzometer had made a video referring to a study that NASA is doing, or one of the space agencies is doing, that I haven't been able to find a reference to, where they're looking at the light that is around what they consider to be a black hole as being curved, and they're looking, in a sense, peering into space to see if they can find a version of the Earth that has been reflected, curved back through time-space, to appear at a distance when it's actually the past. And this is a very interesting question. Would we be able to see things that were actually going on the Earth billions and billions of years ago, if we could see well enough, if it was possible to take an image like that, if it were possible to identify the light that was potentially emanating from a planet, this planet, that curves through time-space? Would it be possible to peer into the past? And the more interesting question in astrometry is that apparent vision the actual influence of the past? Is there a connection through what I'm considering, what I've identified as hypertime, with that as the axis of that influence? In other words, the nature of cause and effect as it plays out on the cosmic scale is considered unfathomable in our modern physics. But what if the very mechanisms of these causal relationships, of these causal chains, can be traced back through the very reflection of that time? And so, obviously, this provides a considerable buttress also for the scientific study of astrology because of the implications. And a lot of scientists are very, very averse to astrology. I think a lot of times for good reason. If you look at the astrological reports that some people that call themselves astrologers put out, they're nonsensical. They're bunk. They really are, a lot of them. And I think there are very, very few really good astrologers these days. And I think that people anyone that attempts that, because of the connotation that this science has in the scientific community, it's completely dismissed. It's completely dismissed that there would be a relationship between these distant things when we know that cause and effect must necessarily emerge. You know, the same scientists that would dismiss that might also believe that intelligence and evolution emerges. And I think that there's a contradiction there. There's a reconciliation that needs to be made in the scientific community between these obviously incompatible worldviews. You can't say that these things emerge without a mechanism. You can't say that cause and effect exists unless there are mechanisms for cause and effect. And these distant connections that things make are implied by the very equations that we have developed to govern and describe things like the electromagnetic force. And you know, the part where you apply hypertime to astrotometry and get into the hyperdimensional version of astrotometry, everything that we have come to cherish in the scientific world about the nature of the interpretation of the physical phenomenon that we describe with our science has to be reclassified. It has to be reconsidered. And so this is scary stuff at that point. It's frightening stuff. And so there's a lot of people that are going to dismiss it and gloss over it as best they can just to avoid the implications. And I just think that that's sad. I think it's incredibly sad that we can't be more flexible in our worldview. And I think that the reason is there's a want for stability. There's a need, I think, that people believe that if they just go along, that it's going to be okay, that it's going to be stable. And I think that the finer truth about that is at that point they're sheeple or cattle even. And you know, they're just grazing along, and then all of a sudden the truck shows up and they're on the truck to go get slaughtered, you know, and that's what's happening, I believe. That's why these things are, in a sense, more esoteric things. Because I believe there are forces that are much greater than humanity that are the ones or the influences that actually have the reins on these things. And I think that humans have the reins to a certain extent, but I think a lot more frequently is the case that we try to pretend that we have the reins when there are actually other forces that are much greater than us, or that we are working with on one level that are being worked with on a different level that we sort of are complicit with or symbiotic with. And these other types of energies, these other types of forms are right in front of you. You're looking at it. You're not looking at me. You're looking at a picture. You're looking at a picture that I'm recording on your computer. We're not interacting. That's an illusion. And that illusion, the nature of that illusion, as a form, as a new form of conduit for consciousness, resonates with more ancient forms. It is a sort of replacement. I understand it as a sort of replacement for forms that were previously extant through different energies, through more natural or seemingly natural emergent systems. And I think that there are these systems that the ancient civilizations were using in the same ways that we are using this system. But I think that this system, the system that we've developed, is just as vulnerable to the types of things that caused their civilizations to collapse. And so, I mean, on some level, that is my higher work. A long time ago, in ancient Rome, the average Roman believed that Apollo had a chariot that was fast enough to catch the setting sun as it went into the earth. because that's what they believed in those days. When those myths about Apollo were created, they believed that that sun went into the earth. And they believed Apollo had a chariot that was fast enough to catch it. And the chariot races, and all of the mythology about that culture was based on lies. And I think that our culture is facing the very same type of movement right now. I think that we are speeding towards not only an uncertain future, but one that is going to find our culture in ruins.